यच्छयोरावृणीमहे गातुं यज्ञाय गातुं यज्ञपतये दैवी स्वस्तिरस्तु नः स्वस्तिर्मानुषेभ्यः ऊर्ध्वञ्जिगातु भेषजम् शन्नो अस्तुद्विपदे शञ्चतुष्पदे ॐ शान्तिः 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 सहस्रशीर्षा पुरुषः सहस्राक्षः सहस्रपात् स भूमिं विश्वतो वृत्वा अत्यतिष्ठद्दशाङ्गुलम् पुरुष एवेदगं सर्वम् यद्भूतं यच्च भव्यम् उतामृतत्वस्येषानः यदन्नेनातिरोहति एतावानस्य महिमा अतो ज्यायागिश्च पूरुषः पादोऽस्य विश्वाभूतानि त्रिपादस्यामृतम् दिवि त्रिपादोर्ध्व उदैत्पुरुषः पादोऽस्येहा भवात् पुनः ततो विश्वं व्यक्रामत् शासनानशने अभि तस्मात् विराट जायत विराजो अधिपूरुषः स जातो अत्यरिच्यत पश्चाद्भूमिमथो पुरः यत्पुरुषेण हविषा देवा यज्ञमतन्वत वसन्तो अस्यासीदाज्यम् ग्रीष्म इद्मः शरद्धविः सप्तास्यासन् परिधजः त्रिः सप्तसविधः कृताः देवागत्यज्ञन्तन्वानाः अबध्नन् पुरुषं पशुम् तं यज्ञं बर्हिषि प्रोक्षन् पुरुषं जातमग्रतः तेन देवा अयजन्त साध्या ऋषयश्च ते तस्माद्यज्ञात् सर्वहुतः संभृतं वृषदाज्यम् पशोगस्तागश्चक्रे वायम्यान् आरण्यान् ग्राम्याश्च ते तस्माद्यज्ञात् सर्वहुतः ऋचः सामानि जज्ञिरे छन्दागुंसि जज्ञिरे तस्मात् यजुस्तस्मादजायत तस्मादश्वा अजायन्त ये केचोभजादतः गावोह जज्ञिरे तस्मात् तस्माज्जाता अजावजः यत्पुरुषं व्यदधुः कतिधा व्यकल्पयन् मुखं किमस्य कौ बाहू कावूरूपादावुच्येते ब्राह्मणोऽस्य मुखमासीत् बाहूराजन्यः कृतः ऊरू तदस्य यद्वैश्यः मध्यागं शूद्रो अजायत चन्द्रमा मनसो जातः चक्षोः सूर्यो अजायत मुखादिन्द्रश्चाग्निश्च प्राणात् वायुरजायत नाभ्या आसीदन्तरिक्षम् शीर्ष्णाद्यौ समवर्तत पद्भ्यां भूभिर्दिशः श्रोत्रात् तथा लोकागम् अकल्पयन् वेदाहमेतं पुरुषं महान्तम् आदित्यवर्णं तमसस्तु पारे सर्वाणि रूपाणि विचित्य धीरः नामानि कृत्वाभिवदन् यदास्ते धाता पुरस्ताद्यमुदा जहार चक्रः प्रविद्वान् प्रदिशश्च तस्रः तमेवं विद्वानमृत इह भवति नान्यः पन्था अजनाय विद्यते यज्ञेन यज्ञमजन्त देवाः तानि धर्माणि प्रथमान्यासन् ते हनाकं महिमानः सचन्ते यत्र पूर्वे साध्याः सन्ति देवाः अध्यः सम्भूतः पृथिव्यैरसाच्च विश्वकर्मणः समवर्तताधि तस्य त्वष्टा विदधद्रूपमेति तत्पुरुषस्य विश्वमाजानमग्रे वेदाहमेतं पुरुषं महान्तम् आदित्यवर्णं तमसः परस्तात् तमेवं विद्वानमृत इह भवति नान्यः पन्था विद्यते जनाय प्रजापतिश्चरति गर्भे अन्तः अजायमानो बहुधा विजायते तस्य धीराः परिजानन्ति योनिम् मरीचीनां पदमिच्छन्ति वेधसः यो देवेभ्य आतपति यो देवानां पुरोहितः पूर्वोजो देवेभ्यो जातः नमो रुचाय ब्राह्मणे रुचं ब्राह्मं जनयन्तः देवा अग्रे तदब्रुवन् यस्त्वैवं ब्राह्मणो विद्यात् तस्य देवा असन्वशे ह्रीश्च ते लक्ष्मीश्च पत्न्यौ अहोरात्रे भाष्वे नक्षत्राणि रूपम् अश्विनं व्यात्तम् इष्टं मनिषाण अमुं मनिषाण सर्वं मनिषाण ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः
Namaste. I started this class a little bit early today, so we still have 4 minutes to go. So I thought I was just watching to see who might have joined early. So there are 17 of you, and so that gives me an idea. So let me... Namaste. I started this class a little bit early today. So let me see. Jairaj, Vandana Agarwal, Darshana, Banjaras, Jaya Chaudhary, Raj Velpuri, Gajananam, Anjali Deshmukh, Shanti Kumar, Krishna Ryan, Shruti Harve, Sudha Tomar, Srinivasan, Zarina Kaji, and Arvind Taylor. 21 now. Chandra Dulam also. Okay, good. We'll start the class in a couple of minutes. Okay, I think we can begin now. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So, a couple of things before we get started. One is that like many of you in the Bay Area, there is a big storm outside, and where I live, whenever there is a high wind, I usually lose power. I don't know why that is the case, because of the branches in the hills or whatever. So if that should happen, we would lose our transmission. I hope it doesn't happen, but just in case, we will probably not then come back, and we will just terminate the class. Okay, so today is the 34th class of this Purusha Suktam course that we undertook, and I think we are reaching the end of it. My guess is that we have got maybe 4 or 5 more classes to go. So I think by the end of February we should wrap up, including a general revision of the Purusha Suktam. This is verse number 11, and Swami Maheshananji has taken 12 verses only. He has not taken the rest of them. I may actually go over them on my own, but I think these are the principal verses, and there is one more verse to go. This verse number 11, which we are currently doing, Mukham Kimasya Kaubahu Kavuru Pada Uchyate, this one easily takes the longest part of the Purusha Suktam. This and the earlier one which said Tasya Atyarichyate, those are the 2 verses that Swamiji has spent a lot of time, and on this one as well. So yesterday I kind of started to review where we are on this verse and how much more is to be doing. And what I found was that in these public lectures, by the way, it's interesting, I was going through the commentary by Swamiji, and at one point he was decrying the state of the nation 24 years after the independence in 1947. So that's when I could tell that this is a 1971 era talk, and he has given 78 talks in New Delhi, which was kind of interesting because I happened to be in New Delhi at that time. I had gone back with IBM to IBM India, and I was in New Delhi part of the time, and then I was going to go to Jamshedpur to take up a job there, which I did eventually, but for a good part of the training and so on in 1971 was in New Delhi. And I didn't know, of course, Swamiji at that time. I had not started my introduction to Vedanta in 1971. That happened in 1973 when I happened to meet Swami Chinmayananji in San Francisco. So anyway, just a coincidence that Swamiji's talks, 78 talks, public talks in New Delhi, and he has established an ashram. I'm talking about Swami Maheshananji. He had established an ashram in New Delhi called Sannyasa Ashram, and it was supposed to be on the outskirts of New Delhi, in a very nice, quiet place. But by the time I visited, it is squarely in the middle of the town, with buses blaring. In fact, there is a bus stop right next to it. It's no longer a serene place anymore, but it is still there. Anyway, this is where he talked. So he gave 78 lectures there, discourses there. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because he was, as I said, decrying the state of the society in India. Because everybody was very excited when we got independence that India would become a model country, a Vedic country. And it had not, for lots of reasons. Lots of reasons. For I think that they were unprepared. And also the big part of what Swamiji was saying was that India had suffered at the hands of alien cultures, not indigenous to the Hinduism, for so long that you cannot take away the vestiges of the effects of that right away. It took a long time for us to really do that. And in the meantime, corruption set in. And when Swamiji was talking about in 1971, things were not that bad. If he were to have come here 3 or 4 years ago, it would have been just absolutely amazing. Now I think the cleanup has started, thanks to BJP and Modi, and hopefully things will be okay. But anyway, the point I wanted to make was that his unusually exhaustive commentary, about this much I think, even more than that, about this much, commentary on the Varna system that we are currently doing was to point out various ills in the society that need to be corrected. And he must have been lecturing a lot of public that he was listening to him. So what I decided was, this is my point, the reason I'm bringing all this up. I've been reading this in the last couple of days, and I found that a lot of the points that he is making do not need to be made in this context, in our teaching, for lots of reasons. I won't go into it. And so I'm going to really condense and even not even take up many of the arguments that he was talking about, just because I think it is inappropriate to the course that we are teaching. And so therefore, the upshot of all this is that I think I'm going to spend probably today and maybe the next week on this verse, Samaja Purusha. Then I think 1 or 2 classes of the next verse. So maybe 4 or 5 classes is what we'll be doing. And then we will make it a declaration that this is complete. And then we can talk about what to do next. Okay? All right. So with that, let us pick up the thread on what we were discussing. And quick link to what we were talking about. We are talking about one of the 2 what are called vyavastha. The vyavastha for a person's life, Purusha's life, the vyavastha for it. So this word vyavastha is an interesting one. I think the closest English translation to the word vyavastha is an arrangement. So actually, if you look at the etymological meaning of vyavastha, it comes from V plus avastha. So avastha means a state. A state where you are in. State means the status, not a political state, but the place where you are is called avastha. So, for example, the daily waking state is called Jagrat Avastha. That means the Atma is fully engaged in a particular role, and it's called Jagrat Avastha. So similarly, Swapna Avastha and Sushupti Avastha. That's how we use the word Avastha. But if you add the prefix V to it, V plus Avastha becomes Vyavastha. And Vyavastha means it has a sense of, Avastha means you find yourself to be in a particular state. Oftentimes, if you remember, those of you from India will remember this, people talk, especially in Hindi, they'll say, Meri aisi avastha ho gayi thi. I got into such a state. That means that you did not want to be in that state, but you found yourself to be in that state. Like you go someplace and you were thinking this is what's going to happen, and something totally different happens. So now you're stuck at that place. This is called avastha. Vyavastha means a very carefully designed avastha is called vyavastha. Visheshena avastha iti vyavastha. So it means an arrangement. So arrangement means that supposing I'm just talking about the modern young people, they are on a blind date. So blind dates means that somebody had arranged for the blind date for a woman and a man to meet at a restaurant or over drinks to see if they like each other and so on. So could be called Vyavastha, means it was arranged. So now we have Ishvara has made two Vyavasthas for all human beings. This should be looked upon as a Vyavastha. It means an arrangement. It's a very interesting thing, this arrangement. So the question is, why did the Ishvara, we covered this topic if you recall, in the Atyarichyata, that the human beings were sort of separated away from Brahmaji, who is the creator, because the separation meant the Brahmaji knows exactly what the self is all about. And he has he has started a new manifestation. In that manifestation, all the beings, including the human beings, were not given the knowledge of the self. They had everything else, but the self's knowledge was missing. And there's different ways of looking at it. This is a fact. Why did you do that? There's no why to it. This is the way the swabhava of the Ishvara is. Just like there is no answer to why is the fire hot? It's not an appropriate question. It is just hot the way it is. So similarly here also, the very nature of plurality means that there is avastha. There you can talk about avastha, where people are searching. And the search is confusing and random. So I can just think about one analogy, it's interesting. This is the various ways of looking at it. One analogy is that the entire cosmos is going through a search of coming out of the maze. Really, this is not an imaginary thing. You can tell, from my understanding and so on, this is what it looks like to me. So there is a maze. You can look at it as a jigsaw puzzle, which I have given an example for, but let's look at it as a maze. Maze meaning that you go through something, and after a while you find, nope, this has a dead end. So you retrace your step and you take some other turns, left, right. Then you find out there is some more dead end, and you get frustrated. Now, there is a solution to the maze. It's not as though it's a cruelty where there is no solution and people like rats have been set aside and they're just going around over and over again. It's not like that. There is a solution. But the solution requires a careful, directed search. And it's interesting, this idea is just coming to my mind, that one of the ingredients of success is smriti. Smriti means your own memory, because you can see it going through certain maze, and then it's very possible that after a while you come back to the same place where you were before. Now, if you don't have good smriti, you will retrace all these steps all over again. It's a duplicate. But if you have smriti, then you can say, oh, this I have been before, I don't need to go there, let me go someplace else. This is the process of search. So, in this search, the Bhagavan, Ishvara, in his kindness, has given us a vyavastha. That's what it is. Vyavastha means there is a order to the search, and the search might still take a little while, and the smriti is part of the search. You have to really learn from before. This I have done before. Because what do they say? It's revisiting, I forget the exact saying, that revisiting history again and again is a mark of stupidity. So similarly here also, the smriti is a very important thing, memory, where you have to see what I have already covered and that has not been successful. Let me go something differently. Anyway, so I would close off this topic to say that the infrastructure of Brahmana, of ashrama and varna, the 4 stages of life for myself, and the 4 types of people that I encounter in this world is a vyavastha. And I need to understand how to negotiate this to get out of the maze. Get out of the maze. This is exactly what needs to be done. So this is what is called varna vyavastha. So here Swami Maheshanji makes a very interesting point, and I'll try to cover this as much as possible in this class and next class before we wrap up this topic. He says, listen, these 4 varnas, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra, reflect the entire cosmos and reflect the makeup of the world in these four segments. And it is very deliberate that there only be 4. So for us to function as a body, as a complementary set of equipment like hands, legs, brain, torso, legs, etc., there needs to be a minimum set of complementary equipment. This is what it is. These four sets of people in the world are the four complementary portions to make the whole cosmos complete. And in today's class, I'm not sure that I can be that orderly in giving you some of this, because there's a lot of material that I was reviewing, and it may just come out in disjointed pieces. I hope not, but it may. And but at least I'll give you an overall picture of what the Varna Vyavastha is that Ishvara had in mind in the Purusha Suktam. So here, one other thing to keep in mind is that the order of these four Varnas, nowadays we call it classes. India has a class system, upper class, lower class, and so on. That's just an English word that we use. Well, Varna means color, really. There are four types of color, just like, you have this white, which is Vibgyor, which has 7 different, violet, blue, etc. So these are 7 colors that constitute any white color. Similarly, these 4 Varnas constitute the whole society, and this constitution is not only there for the human beings, but also for Devatas. And these classifications are universal. It's not though just in India. So Swami Maheshananji actually spends a lot of time discussing this. He says, if you look around, and he was very well traveled, by the way. I think he spent a lot of time in Europe reviewing the understanding of I think he spent a lot of time in Germany and understood what the Germans understood about Hinduism, discussed that with them. He's quite familiar with the Western philosophers. And what he was saying was that these 4 types of people are everywhere. Are everywhere. There's obviously a mixture, as we will discuss it today also. But the purity of the classifications is unmistakable. And so what you find is that there are people who are, as we have discussed it before, researchers and scientists. And for them, knowledge of something is the real pleasure of their life. They delight in it. You see people like this. They don't care about fame or money or anything. They may also, which we will see today, that it is a mixture. Nobody is a pure scientist. But I think the main thing that drives such people is research and an understanding, insights. They are the scientists. So this is one class of people. Then you have other class of people who are ready to sacrifice, ready to lead, ready to protect the people. And so this is the Kshatriyas. Then there are people who are very interested in making sure that the whole society is doing well, that there is material progress, that cities are well developed, that money is well spent, and that they are productive, and that trading of things can be done efficiently. Farming has to be done. They manage the economy. So these are the Vaishyas. To them, the well-being of the society is very important. And then there are people who do not have the mental makeup to lead or to do research. but they do a lot of seva, they do a lot of service, and they work hard, and they're good people. And so this is what is called Shudras. So Swami Maheshanji said that in my travels around Europe and other places, I found that these 4 types of people are everywhere. What is not there in other countries, except for India, is the formal delineation of these 4 varnas, and for a purpose which we will discuss now. Why are they so formally delineated in India and not any place else? Okay, so let's go into that. But before I do, I think I mentioned to you that this Varna system not only exists in human beings, but also in the Devatas, or in the celestials also. And so our Puranas have actually detailed this very well. So for example, so you find people who are Brahmana Devatas, Kshatriya Devatas, Vaishya Devatas, and Shudra Devatas. So Pusha is considered to be a Shudra Devata. Rudra, these are all individual devatas, are in different classifications. I won't go into the details of it, but I would say one other thing. What is given is that these devatas are given a particular designation to follow. You see, they are given a particular designation to follow. And this is what is called dharma, swadharma. And they have to follow that even if they do not fulfill all of the qualitative requirements to be in that segment. Doesn't matter. And so there's always a big mixture. Here's Swami Maheshanji gives his example. He says, look, you look at, so there are 3 gunas, right? As you know that there is Rajoguna, Rajas guna, Tamo guna, and Sattva guna. Okay? So now, take Brahmaji. Brahmaji is supposed to be predominantly Rajoguna. Rajoguna means you need an energy to create, to be very careful in making sure everything goes well. This is called Kriya Shakti. So Brahmaji was predominantly a Rajoguna Devata. But that doesn't mean that he did not teach. In fact, he taught the Vedas. Spent a lot of time teaching Vedas. He spent as much time teaching Vedas to his students as in creating. So there you have, it's not just only one guna, you have lots of different gunas. Then you take Vishnu, who is predominantly Sattva guna. So Sattva guna means calmness, meditative, creative. But Vishnu in the Puranas is famous for making sure that all the bad people, Rakshasas, etc., are killed, are eliminated. So this famous Sudarshana Chakra, it is really meant for really making sure that there is action in eliminating badness whenever necessary. And Ishvara does this in his own way. Sometimes we find, why isn't Ishvara taking care of this guy, this idiot, that idiot? Time will come, he will take care of it. They won't go unpunished, no way. So, Swami Maheshananji says that if you look at the Vishnu's Sattva Guna, it is not just Sattva Guna, he also has Tamo Guna. So Tamo Guna means he has to eliminate and to kill. So both of them are there. So for example, he gives the in the Bhagavad Gita. So Krishna is an avatar of Vishnu, and Swami Maheshananji says, listen, he has taught only 2 people completely. Like he had 2 main disciples. He had many other disciples also, but 2. One is Arjuna and the other one is Uddhava. So that's why the Bhagavad Gita and Uddhava Gita are quite well known. He only taught 2 people. And he is supposed to have killed thousands of people. He was so busy in eliminating the Shatrus. And also he had 108,000 wives. It's difficult to imagine. But the idea was that he was a fun-loving person. Fun-loving person. In spite of the fact that he was a teacher, that he was a king and an enforcer. So there are multiple qualities to him. Similarly, Rudra. Rudra is mainly responsible for Samhara Kriti, which means that he eliminates bad things, just like in the case of Brahmaji also and Vishnu also. But on the other hand, he is the one who taught Vedanta to Sanat Kumaras, the 4 Sanat Kumaras. And so he's a teacher too. So similarly, Swamiji concludes that the 4 types of people that we know do not just go by their gunas. Don't just go by gunas. Because all 4 of them have mixed gunas. So you find Brahmanas also don't always teach. They can also be very interested in making money and becoming leaders. But their main function is, in fact, Brahmanas, as I think we have discussed it before, if you now look at the Vyavastha is that the Brahmana person, and by the way, so now we can even go and talk a little bit about the Varna, which is a born Varna, Jati Varna, versus Guna Varna. So there, as we have discussed it before, is that because of the DNA and the fact that the minds do not change suddenly from life to life. See, Sukshma Sharira and Sthula Sharira are different. Sthula Sharira, which is the gross body, may change drastically depending upon the karmas. And so even though there is some disagreement on this, there is general agreement from our acharyas that if a person behaves in an animalistic manner, he or she will be born as that animal in the next life. And if an animal has now spent enough time in paying off the debts, he becomes a human being and is given a chance. Even though in the very beginning life of the human being, after being an animal, he might show some animalistic tendencies. And one can even conclude, I'll go into this in a little bit more detail, that the animalistic tendencies of the human beings, it's not as though they are out to kill people, is not to have any other goal in life except to just procreate, eat, and enjoy. This is what an animal does too. The animal has some very minimal needs, and so protection of the body by looking for food, procreation, propagation of its own species, and a little bit of enjoyment. We can see I have a sort of a fountain in the back, and the birds just love to flock there and take a bath in that. It's a pleasure to see them enjoy, especially on a hot day. So they also have some pleasure. They also have some procreation activities, and primarily they bring up their kids and so on. So if the people are also exactly like that and nothing more, then they have recently arrived in the human kingdom. And what distinguishes people that they have been around for a while and now they are progressing is to do something more than just what the animals do. In fact, so Swami Maheshanji spends a lot of time on this. He says that if you look at the 4 varnas, there are various ways the varnas are separated from each other. But there is one way which is very predominant. And if you want to recognize the differences between Brahmana, Kshatriya and Vaishya on one hand and Shudra on the other hand, it is this. So, a Shudra, in fact, before I say that, so let me say this. There is a natural birth for everybody, and there is a deliberate birth by somebody. So, 2 kinds of births. One is a natural birth where you had no choice. You were given a set of mother and father and an environment, and primarily you are influenced by that. This is a natural birth that everybody has. Then a deliberate birth, this is what is called Dvija, or the Christians also believe, born again. So this Dvija is common to Brahmana, Kshatriya and Vaishya. Shudra, on the other hand, is just not interested in looking at ways to transform the life in different ways. Swamiji says that if you really, most of us are Shudras. If you don't look into how to really get out of this maze, and you are just fully engaged in what Swamiji has pointed out is Shoka Moha Karma. Shoka Moha Karma. If you're unhappy with your present situation, you do something and then you're satisfied, then you finish your karma and then you go back into Shoka again. This is what happens. And he says if this characterizes one's life, then that person is called a Shudra. Whereas, if you look at the other three, what you find is there is a sankalpa. There is something inside me that I want not just to be an enjoyer and a sufferer, an enjoyer, a karmaphala. I want to look into that where I take charge of a new direction and also primarily to find Ishvara. Because all this sankalpa is not possible by yourself. You need the help of a Shraddha towards Ishvara or to a Guru. And if you do that, then you should be considered in one of these three. Now, out of these three then, the Brahmana excels. Excels how? Because a Brahmana is the one. Doesn't matter whether you're born Brahmana or not, but if you just look at the emphasis of the life of a person, you find a person who is totally devoted to the study and methodology of gaining freedom and Ishvara at the detriment of everything else. You may need to be a Kshatriya and a Vaishya from time to time. You need to have some money. It's not just like in the case of Rudra and Vishnu and others, it's not just that you don't have multiple gunas. So for example, Swamiji says that supposing there is a Brahmana who is a teacher and is a very dedicated teacher, and he finds that there are some students who are not following him or her, and if he gets angry at them, this is very important for him to get angry. You cannot say, I don't get angry. I don't care what the students do. I am not, let them do what they want. You can't do that. You have to really be concerned about how the students are following, and if that requires a certain deliberate anger on your part, so be it. This is exactly how the Puranic stories are, that these rishis also, they give a shapa to someone because they have to uphold a certain, so it's not as though they are no longer called a rishi. So even if they are doing something, it doesn't mean that they have completely changed their stripes. Swami Maheshananji gives this example. He says, if you look at the classical differentiation between a mother and a father, a female and a male within a family, and more of a traditional family, is that the mother's job is to give birth to the progeny and to raise them, take care of them, and feed them, to help them grow, to get them into the right school. This is what the mother's job is. The father's job, on the other hand, is that again, this is kind of like a single earner family, not the modern one, which there are some different requirements. But the traditional role for a father was to provide all of the requirements so that the female person of the house and all the children are taken care of. There's enough money, there is shelter, the house is paid for, etc., etc. This was the job, and to protect them. In case somebody comes in and threatens them, and the person who has to take the lead is the father. So this is the role of those two that has been automatically given. This is what it is. Because the mother is the one who has to give birth to the baby, not the father. Mother is the one that has to breastfeed the child, to make sure that meals are well cooked and so on. Now, Swami Meshanji says that suppose, for whatever reason, the father seems to do a better job of raising the kids. The mother may actually get angry, may have, may not know how to really behave with the kids, but the father is the one who is more forgiving, more tolerant, has more time, let's say, for whatever reason. So he's the one who's raising the children rather than the mother. Does he become a mother? He may actually do this for a while, but then he goes back to his main, supposing he's out of work for a while, and he has to really help the children grow in the family and so on. Then once he finds a job, he goes back to it and is no longer the main protector of the children. So the point is this. Swamiji says just because a person has to change their occupation doesn't mean that their main dharma changes. A Brahmana should stay as a Brahmana. Kshatriya should stay as a Kshatriya. Means that the Kshatriya's focus should be on leadership, sacrifice, protection. And so now all these kinds of things that we were talking about are particularly important in terms of their contribution to the society. This is a point that Swami Meshanji makes very well. He says, you can actually be a selfish person and do everything that you need to satisfy your own needs, and yet you don't grow into a spiritual person. He gives an example. He says, take a Brahmana. So the most important thing in the Brahmana, they say, is tapas. Is austere living is the hallmark of a Brahmana. To follow the edict of learning and teaching, whether or not there is money in it, there is fame in it, nothing. So tapas is the most important one. Okay? So now he says, if that's the case, there may be a Brahmana who says, okay, I'm ready for tapas. I want to be a Brahmana. So what does he do? So here Swamiji says, one is, look at the contrast between tapas and lobha. Lobha means greed, desired needs to be fulfilled through money, power, etc. is called lobha. And tapas means deliberately discarding lobha, because I don't want to be that kind of a person. I just want to be a simple person following the main objectives of my varna. This is called tapas. So tapas versus lobha. Swamiji says that suppose this Brahmana has decided, okay, I don't want money, I just want to do what tapas. He says that suppose the tapas is directed just for himself. Gets up in the morning, he's very strict about his breakfast, his diets, doesn't need any money, he's just so on and so forth. This is wonderful, no doubt about it. But until he converts that tapas for the goodwill of others, he will not grow as a spiritual person. This is the point that he is making for the entire Samaja Purusha, how the Samaja Purusha has to behave. So as far as your own internal Adhyatmika Dharma is concerned, we've already covered that through the ashrama system, that you have to sacrifice the Purusha. You don't sacrifice something else, you sacrifice your own ahankara. We've already covered that. Now, if the tapas is also used for that purposes, you've already covered one vyavastha, which is the ashrama avastha. But you have not covered the second vyavastha, which is varna vyavastha. So in the varna vyavastha, the Brahmana should continue to parlay, to project the tapas that he has now conquered for the goodness of others, for performing rituals for others, for teaching tapas to others. If somebody should call in a priest in a temple and said, I really need your help, and the priest has already done some prior arrangements and so on, you should see whether the new request merits you to break the other one. You can ask the other people, is it okay if we change your puja because somebody really needs me here? This is the tapas for the society, this type of a thing. And this is also projected for all the other vyavasthas. So let's take Vaishya for example. So Vaishya's main objective should be well-beingness of himself or herself and the family. You must make enough money, you should be totally devoted to it, you must enjoy doing it, you find a lot of satisfaction in it. All that is good. And if you do this in a very dharmic fashion, then as a sacrifice of the Purusha, you are going in the right direction. But if you only do the money collection for yourself and not for the society, you have not grown as a spiritually oriented Vaishya. But a spiritually oriented Vaishya makes sure that you are part of a network where the whole country becomes more prosperous. The state, the city, the municipality. So you are money-minded. You see, you are money-minded, which is okay, because everybody has a different way of looking at things. But the money-mindedness also has a dimension of helping the society. But if you just hoard things to yourself, and have no benefit for someone else, then you have not grown. You're not adequately equipped to be. And so these two vyavasthas rather. So the adhyatmika avastha, which is yajna purusha, and the samashti avastha, which is samaja purusha, these two go hand in hand. You have to go in this manner. You cannot just go in one direction or the other. Both of them have to be done. So this is the description of the Varna system, the Varna Vyavastha. And if we follow that, again, not for the goodness of the society, but for my own goodness, for my own growth, this is the Vyavastha which is pointed out by Ishvara in Purusha Suktam, and so well discussed by these acharyas that we are following. And in terms of Shudra, it is seva to everybody else. And if you do seva to everyone else, you can do seva just for yourself, and you will not grow as a person. But if you were to do seva to others, then that spirit of sacrifice elevates you to become a very spiritual person. I think I gave you this example. I mean, we have been very lucky in our family to really find these manual laborers and people who have been so helpful to us. So when I was growing up in Bihar, we had a person from Odisha who used to live with us, and he was the cook. His name was Chintamani. And when I was growing up, I had a lot of medical problems. I was extremely asthmatic, and a lot of allergies. My skin was a mess. And quite frankly, my mother would sometimes say, I wasn't sure you were going to live. And there were nights where not only she could not sleep at all, not only would I. So I was unusually very sick. But there was one person, Chintamani, who was so helpful for me. Even at night time, he would tell my mother, why don't you sleep, I'll take care of him. And I remember growing up how loving he was to me. To a fault. Anything that I wanted to eat, he will make for me. Anytime if I wanted to play some games while I was sick, he was there for me all the time. He was like a mother to me, really. And he was not an educated person at all, but what a wonderful person he was. And even now we are surrounded by people who are so helpful. They always show up in time. And our birthdays, my wife really gets mad at them. This woman that comes in for helping us to clean the home and sometimes so on, she brings flowers for our birthdays. And we says, no, why are you doing this? Well, we have to pay her more money just because of that. But it is thus goodness of our own heart. So it really, in terms of their outward help to others, it doesn't matter who you are. You can be a very selfish Brahmana, you can be etc. So through the past DNA, you may be born into a society where you are called a Brahmana, you are called a Kshatriya, whatever it is. But the main thing is that given that situation, you have to delineate a service to others as well as to yourself, both of them, both aspects of it, in a manner where you discover Ishvara. And so this is the system that we have in the Varna system, and it's kept very, very formally done. Of course, it is abused now, despite the fact that the government actually gives more help to the lower, the castes, the outcasts, and so on. But there is still, society still has some biases, which will slowly go away, I hope. But from a spiritual standpoint, the ideas are very clear. That really everyone is given a way to get out of the maze and to become totally free in this life itself. It doesn't matter who you are in terms of your Varna classification. Anyway, so that's the discussion about the Varna system. And so I will stop there. I think that I have kind of picked from the various ideas that Swamiji had in the discussion of this, in this bulk of this course, bulk of this mantra rather. So I may actually revise this very quickly and pick out anything that I may not have communicated to you. So I have a feeling that by next week we will have finished this part of it completely, and then we will go to verse number 12 after that. Okay, so with that, let me close the class. Om Asato Ma Satkamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityor Ma Amritam Gamaya Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Shri Guru Pyo Namaha. Harihi Om. So Shanti Kumar says that the human resource departments are using the Myers-Briggs type indicator 4x4 matrix to classify personalities into 16 taken for selection and suitable for the job. Excellent. I was not aware of this particular methodology. You've been in this. So, yeah, it's a good way to translate that into something actionable and being useful for these companies. And yeah, good, excellent. Balamani, how can it be implemented today in the modern society? Maybe Ishvara preachers may have to evolve. So I think I agree with you that that there has been a major deterioration of this model in the society, and until the general education has to be reinstituted so that families and educators and leaders understand what is necessary, where are the problems. This will not change overnight. I think that this is relevant. This is somewhat tangential to what we are doing, but Swami Maheshwaranji has pointed out that even a headlong progress towards development is detrimental to the human spirit. Now, India, of course, needs to change, and I am not questioning the Modi government's emphasis towards development. I think that is all there because we have really been left behind, and we are in a very miserable state where the normal infrastructure is not available. All of that has to be done, no doubt about it. So development has to take place. But what Swamiji has been saying is that more of everything is detrimental to our spiritual growth. You don't need spiritual growth for... I'll give you another example. Swami Dayanand used to say that when he grew up in the village that he did in Tamil Nadu, Manjukudi, which I think some of you know that you may have even been there, and I was there last year. I've been there twice. Once, long time ago, when Swamiji was teaching us in Piercy in 1979, and then again recently I just went there for the Aim for Seva. But what Swamiji was saying was that his village life was extremely productive for him. All the things that he really needed to learn about life, he learned from just the wisdom of just 250 families in the village, something like that. And they also had the same varnas. They had brahmanas, they had kshatriyas, and so on. But how to behave with each other, how to utilize each other's talents towards the self-growth. All that was there in the village structure. But then he says, once you go to the city, which is epitomized by the growth, and the city is characterized by the following things. Here's the interesting thing. A village versus a city means that in a village, you know everyone in the village, every one person. If somebody new comes in, you immediately find out who that person is and say hello to that person. In a city, that is not the case. In general, you know very few people, most of them you don't. So as a result of that, the very basic structure of this Varna system and so on is lost in the purpose. There is competition, there is encroachment, there is all kinds of stuff that happens. Anyway, all I'm saying is that we are a long way away from building a society where this can be done well. But the meantime, at an individual level, at a spiritual level, we can learn from having to, we can learn from the basic concepts of the Varna system. That can be done, even though society has not yet progressed. So it will take us a long time. Interesting, Maslow's hierarchy. Yes, something like that can also be used for that as well. Ah, what happened to this light? Maybe there is a... All right, if there's no other questions, then I will close this class, and we will see after this course finishes what to do next. There's a couple of ideas that I have. I will run that by you, and if you're interested, then we can continue. Otherwise, we can wind up this Tuesday night course. And but I think that we are coming towards the end of the Purusha Suktam, and hopefully in the next 4 or 5 classes we should wind this up. Okay, thank you. See you next week. Om.